Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. Do you know you can learn a lot about people from horses? In fact, if you know what to look for, horses are constantly providing feedback about their riders, sometimes even as living and breathing fact checkers. See, as my guest will tell you, horses don't lie. She's a leadership and executive coach who grew up with horses. She taught people how to ride before embarking on a career in law enforcement, where she gained even more insight into human behavior. And now, as an executive coach and trainer, she uses that unique insight to help her clients focus on performance and resolve conflicts. Let's get right into it with Pamela Cournoyer. Welcome to the show, Pamela Cournoyer. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I'm sorry. I just had to pronounce your name again because the first time we met, I thought it was really funny. And this should give our listeners a really great insight into how engaging you are, Pamela, and maybe set the bar a little high for this conversation. But the first time I met you, you said to me, I said, well, geez, Pamela, that's a very interesting last name. How do you pronounce it? And you're like, it just rhymes with Annoyer.
That's right.
Right? Pamela Cournoyer rhymes with
You
Annoyer.
remember, Dan.
Of course
I'm
I do.
impressed.
Well, I mean, I remember a lot of little factoids and I don't remember anything important. So anything else we talked about during that conversation may not come forward. We'd have to kind of start over. But in all seriousness, I really enjoyed that little piece of you that you just shared, because it gives a kind of an insight into the type of person, the type of openness, the type of kind of candor, and the complete and utter lack of ego, right? That I think makes for an incredible guest. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And
am I now. Who are you interviewing?
Well, I don't do interviews. We just have conversations.
Okay, that's even better.
But here we are with Pamela Cournoyer, and I couldn't be happier. Pamela was referred to me by Lynn Hazen, who you all might recall was a terrific guest a couple of months back. A recruiter from Chicago who just had some beautiful stories to tell about her and herself and her mom, and just basically looking at the job market and looking at the future for her people. And Pamela is in a related field, but not in recruitment. She's in coaching. And I want to really start off by asking you, Pamela, to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into executive coaching, what it is that thrills you about that business, but maybe start off with your story.
Okay, my story. We're not going to start with birth, but we will go to probably age 17. And I used to have horses. My parents bought me show horses. So I was so excited. I was going to have these beautiful horses. I was going to learn to ride and love horses. But all my girlfriends and some of the guys would come over and they wanted to ride my horses. And the big no-no with the show horses is you don't let anybody touch your show horses. So my friends would come over and they'd all want to ride, and I couldn't let them ride unless I taught them how to ride, because they had to learn how to sit on the horse. They had to learn not to bump their mouth, not to irritate them, how to keep that horse so that it was ready for show at all times. And that launched my training career. I started teaching people and working with them. And then after a while, I started teaching horseback riding lessons, like for a living, as during the middle of all the rest of my jobs in my world. And when I would notice the horse would be irritated, and I'd say, well, you're pulling on their mouth. And they'd be saying, no, I'm not. Or I'd say, you're kicking them. No, I'm not. Well, all I had to do was look at the horse, and the horse is telling me everything. Ears are back, tails switching, stomping their feet, or they're just acting irritated. And so I know that person thinks they're doing one thing, but they're doing something totally different. And so it started getting me to start paying attention to what people said they were doing and what was actually the results of what they were doing.
It's the living metaphor.
This is the beginning of my coaching. Yeah. This is the beginning of my coaching career. So
yeah, you couldn't have asked for a better metaphor probably for
oh my gosh. And horses
for the
are
way
beautiful
people
teachers.
Behave.
Yes.
Horses. I mean, I had the pleasure of learning how to ride a horse. Well, not a specific horse, but horses, I guess, in general, when I was a youngster and, going to summer camp in the Poconos, as a lot of city people did in those days. And this is like, this is back in the mid 80s, I suppose, early mid 80s. One of the great things about going to summer camp was the horseback riding. And I always, I was a little kid. I was such a small kid for my age. I loved the horses. And I always felt like if I ever had the chance to, be reborn as a cowboy, that wouldn't be a bad thing. And of course I was 9 or 10 years old at the time. Right. So, being a cowboy was certainly up on my list of things to do anyway. Before I disabused myself of that notion. But like the great thing, the horses, I remember clearly that, when you're approaching the horse or when you're getting on the horse or something, like they sense everything about you. And our instructors were always very clear about how to, I guess, I don't want to say commune, but how to approach the animal, how to bond with your horse, how to be, like kind of partnership with the horse as you ride.
Yeah. That's a great definition of partnership.
Yeah. But it didn't get to the point where I was adult enough to understand that the horse is telling other people about me, right? And I suppose that is an interesting insight to have. I mean, if you're, if you go back to that time, and what really struck me about what you said was that the horse would be clearly showing what's happening, and the person was saying, no, I'm not doing that. And that is absolutely what happens all the time.
It does
in life. But it's not intentional.
No,
it's not intentional, right?
No, hence, we mean the best.
Yeah. Hence, you need a good coach to talk to.
It's when you're not getting results. If you're not getting the results that you want, that's when you want to look to somebody to say, hey, what am I doing that I'm not seeing? Because often when we're frustrated over something because we're not getting what we want, then there's something going on. And it's just having another set of eyes look in and say, tell me more about this. So I can't watch what they're doing so much anymore because, it's video and I'm not watching them with other people. But as they tell the story, it all comes out. It's amazing what comes out in the story.
Well, do you think people, before they talk to you, they think through and rehearse what their story is? Or are you talking about, this kind of spur of the moment, spontaneous, explanation of what's happening?
Even if somebody is really perfect in what they say, just the fact that they're watching every word that they're saying says that they're worried that something's going to come out that they don't want to have come out. So they're watching it. Oh, you can tell that, when you're talking to people, they're either spontaneous and real, or they're hiding something. They're holding back. They're trying to be something a little bit different than what maybe they are, or how they're really feeling. Well, we all read it.
Yeah, and it's. I was talking with somebody recently about this whole idea of the BS that you live with, right? The belief systems. Yeah. It's funny, like once you start to talk to coaches, then BS takes on a whole new meaning.
It does.
It's no longer a joke. It's like BS. Yeah, the belief system. Yeah, I get it. Not that BS, the other BS. But it is BS. It's the same thing, right?
It
you
is.
live with your own belief systems. How that influences the way that you tell stories about yourself and about others and about what you're doing. I mean, I imagine that's a lot of what you pick apart with people.
Yes. Yeah. Although I wouldn't say I pick it apart, I would say that I pick up on it. So it might be, for instance, when you told your story about the horses and that you wanted to be a cowboy, but now, you came to a new place in yourself that said no. So what was that? What was that made you think cowboys are no longer cool? Those are things that I would just ask. Why? Why no longer a cowboy?
Are you asking for real? I'm
asking for real.
If you're asking for real, I don't mind getting the tables turned a little bit. I don't know. I guess you leave the things of childhood behind as you start to become a grown up. But I mean, I was riding horses at summer camp once a week for 6, 8 weeks in the summer, wasn't like really serious about it at all. But, so many, when I was a boy, we played the old cowboys and Indians. I know we're not supposed to say that anymore, right?
Well, you played games. Yes.
But we played those games, and that's what it was called. That was what it was called at the time. As awful as that might be to the modern ear. And we learned a lot about, what not to do and what to do from those kinds of childhood games. But, apart from the games of wearing the hat or wearing the headdress, there was very little of the cowboy in me. I think as I grew up, there was very little of the desire to, strike out, be like a cowboy is a very solo adventure, right? It seems to me anyway, to be something that's very, very lonely. And also there's the whole idea of the fact that you need to know how to survive on your own and build a fire and those kinds of things, which were a little bit outside of my ken, I mean, but go get the water, that means go to the faucet and turn the knob. It doesn't mean like go to the creek and pick up a bucket and
Exactly.
So, the skill sets weren't matching. I mean, for sure. But the games of childhood are just that. They're just games. And, when you get to, okay, sure, I was riding real horses, which by the way, I think is an incredibly important life skill that everybody should have. And trying to tell my daughter that these days. But I would, I just, when I grew up a little bit more, I suppose, just never occurred to me like it was outside of the bounds of reality for me. And in fact, just talking about it now is maybe the first time I've thought about that in any serious way, because I've always been a fan of Westerns, of the great Western films of the modern era, like, starting with probably Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven and moving forward into like 3:10 to Yuma and the whole Raylan Givens story. Anyway, all these great Westerns that I really love, and reading all Elmore Leonard books about it and all these great things. I never put two and two together that maybe that has something to do with my love for horses as a kid, because I really did love to ride, I really did. And I thought I was good at it.
You probably
I get back
were.
home.
Well,
it was out in the countryside in the summertime. I get back home to the city. I'm from a town called Bayonne, which is in northern New Jersey, and I think the only horses in Bayonne are probably the ones that a few cops ride here and there. I mean, I really barely recall. There may have been at one time, but that's the part of New Jersey that doesn't have horses. And I would tell my friends, yeah, I'm riding horses, and they had a lot of words to say to me, and none of which I'm going to say here. Just none of them indicated any belief in what I was going to say. How could you, you little kid? How could you little guy, like be riding horses? Get out of town. No way. So maybe,
Do you think that might have influenced you? Those statements?
It's possible, probable even. In fact, we were talking a lot recently about, belief systems and how these get anchored in you, right? How they get inculcated in you, and you believe you are a certain way, partly because of just the way that you are, the influences that you have growing up, and the inputs you have in your life, and uncovering that is an important thing. Yeah, I was a little kid. I was a short guy until I was like in college. I didn't really, so I always had this feeling that I was smaller than I actually am. And which made me also believe that I couldn't be an athlete, right? I couldn't do anything with a lot of physicality to it, So I really turned to books and to intellectual pursuits, which is not a bad thing either.
No.
And then I get to after college time, and I still have this, I'm just a small guy mentality, and then I go over to Japan and I'm a giant. Right. Like
it was the best thing you could have done for yourself.
Maybe I'm like 6 feet tall. I was tiny. Like I was still like skinny as a rail, but like, I'm like, wait a second. So how does it happen that somebody who's like under 5 feet tall at age 13 is now, towering over people? And, I enjoyed that for a while, I will tell you. And then I
Well,
naturally just started to fill out and, lift weights and do things. And I was like, oh, jeez, where'd this come from? So now I figure maybe I have a little bit more of a cowboy, of athletic capability or cowboy physique maybe than I did certainly, for my early life. But yeah, just like you get to the point where you're like, I'm a small guy. It's not what small guys do, right? I am not an athlete, so I can't do those things. And that's that
interesting
limiting belief,
stories
that belief system.
that you told yourself. And it's okay, because you are where you are and you're actually quite successful. So keep going with it, keep rolling with it. It's working.
Well, thank you. I'll take that. I mean, I have been working at it, and but one of the things I've been working at is absolutely putting those kind of beliefs behind you, or acknowledging them, saying and saying, "Hey, I see you there." Like one of the things that came up in one of my conversations a little while back with a wonderful coach named Beth Masterman. She taught me about family. What's it called? It's called inner family theory, or inner family therapy, or something like that. I'm not going to get the title right, but the idea is that you have a lot of parts inside you. A lot of you're basically a multiple personality.
Absolutely.
Entity, and there's a core self, and then there's all these different parts.
Yes.
For people with disorders, obviously those parts are very, very pronounced. But even for any normal person, you have a family inside you that you have to manage. And it's the management of that family that allows you to, kind of deal with a lot of the nonsense you have to deal with, and succeed in other ways, or, find things that you want to do, and what have you. And I think that that cowboy part is probably still there somewhere, but the little guy part, right? That belief system, that belief that I was he's still sitting there in that chair, hiding somewhere.
How did you feel when you were on a horse? Did you feel bigger?
Love being on a horse. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just ask you this, because this is just running through my head, because I never wanted to be a cowgirl. Although I was a rodeo princess, I did all that. The reason why I'm saying that is I never really wanted to be a cowgirl. Had no intention. And at the same time, I did end up doing lots of cowgirl things, but really I was a horse lover. And there's a big difference that I can see, because I probably could build a fire and I probably could do all those things, but that's not my thing. So I'm just curious for you, why you equated cowboy with horse, when especially where you live, hardly anybody even does cowboy stuff. It's all English, and it's hunter jumper, and it's dressage, and it's...
Well, I mean, even that stuff was alien to me. I didn't, to be honest with you, I just didn't know, right? Who knew what a cowboy really was, except what you see on TV, or the Lone Ranger, or with some heroes, or, it's a guy on a horse with guns and a nice hat, I mean,
and
go
cool
fast, cool boots, a rope, and you're out in the prairie, and, running down whatever you're running down, buffalo or enemies, or, whatever. I mean, when you're a kid, it's all kind of miraculous and fantastical, but I didn't know what they really did, I was watching Yellowstone. That show. Have you seen Yellowstone?
Yeah, I love that show.
So
they've got some of the most gorgeous horses ever.
Oh, and that it rekindled a couple of feelings about horses for me. Like,
oh, good. So they're still there, Dan.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to be. Yeah, and watching Yellowstone. This is what cowboys do. Like, those are cowboys. And I was watching. I'm like, thank God I never became a cowboy. That's a horrible job.
Yeah, when you watch that show, it makes you not want to be a cowboy.
Ever. I mean, some of it, yeah, it's a little romantic, and it's like, in the sense of incentive, the back to nature, the wide open spaces, and the glories of the world around you, and hey, living by your wits and by your skill. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and these guys have some major anger management issues, and they have unresolved stuff all over the place.
Well, it's not something I would ever consider, for sure. But but anyway, that reminds me, you are, you're a coach, right? You talk to people and you help executives, you help leaders to be better versions of themselves. And, maybe in some way, you're talking to a lot of people who are kind of cowboys out there. And, you're trying to, or you're helping them to get a grip on how they're going to get into that, I guess, how they're going to improve themselves, how they're going to get better, how they're going to stop being out in this wild west and start being in civilization in some ways.
That's probably more true than you think. I mean, if we just did that parallel and we said we have some CEOs or some executives who are bullying their people, or they're saying they're frustrated with their people, they want to fire them all, they just want to get rid of someone. And that goes back to, if we just go to the show Yellowstone, that goes back to the guys that the only ones they could get along with really were other horses. They couldn't get along with their friends. They beat each other up half the time in the clubhouse. They had to be half drunk. They had to be half out of their mind to actually get along and work with people. So then we find ourselves as this lone ranger who knows how to maybe communicate with a horse or whatever your specialty is. And then you have to also communicate with other people who do not have that specialty. And then we either have a disconnect or we can figure it out. So just working with people who have that disconnect or who just don't like fitting but they have to. Or maybe they're feeling like I'm not fitting and I want to, and I've got to figure this out because, your emotional intelligence really does dictate how much more money you can make. So if you want to have a greater opportunity to work with people and make more money, then you want to increase your emotional intelligence. You want to step it up. You want to step into yourself and other people and learn to read them and understand yourself and let go of some of these BS's, belief systems that have been troubling you for your life and getting in the way of working with others.
It's a big ask, right? I mean, it's a very big task, I think, to take care of that. Now, you have become a master trainer of trainers. I mean, you've been in coaching now for 2 decades ish, right?
Well,
roughly thereabouts.
Probably longer than that, even, but a long time. We can't see my age because nobody's looking at me, so we're just going to assume that you think I'm young and wild at heart.
Just based. I know you had a career. You were doing many different things, but focused entirely on coaching. It seems like it's been the last several decades, and management training, coaching, and coaching coaches and training the trainers. I mean, to get to that point, you'd have to have not only the kind of training that you've had, but also a kind of confidence and a kind of ability to sit and understand people and listen and hear people. How did you get to that point in your life where you are, where you knew that this is where you wanted to go, and where not only are you helping executives to be better leaders or helping leaders to become executives, but you're helping those who help them to be better helpers?
Exactly.
It's multi-layered. So I'm peeling the Pamela onion. What's happening here?
Thank you. Where's the Pamela onion? So honestly, the horses are what gave me confidence. I used to work on a breeding farm, so I was working around a lot of stallions, and they don't care what you are. If you're in their way between them and the mare that they're interested in, they just as soon kill you as, you're just in their way. So I had to learn to step up. I really had to learn to step up and be confident, even when I didn't feel it. And I had to learn to walk differently. I had to learn to talk differently. I had to learn to have a lot more confidence. So when I would speak to a horse, it came from confidence and not from something that they just were like, oh yeah, I got you. I got your number. And then when I got into law enforcement for a while as well. And again, in order to speak with people and get them to listen, I had to have confidence. They do not listen to somebody who is mamby-pamby, just kind of, let's do this. And not that I didn't feel like that. There were just times that I knew that I had to throw out my arena voice, is what I call it.
The arena voice?
My arena voice. So when I would get into an arena, I had to belt it out so that people could hear me, my students, all the way around the ring. And I had to sound confident, or else they were going to believe themselves over what I was seeing with the horse. So I had to just have confidence. And it has probably been my greatest job getter. It's so funny. I'm being totally honest. My first 10 jobs I was fired from when I first started my career.
It's a pattern.
It's a pattern. It was a pattern. It's not a pattern now. At the same time, what was interesting is that I BS'd my way into every one of those jobs. And then I would get the job and I didn't know how to do it. But I was so confident. They were like, oh, she's a shoo-in. And that I didn't know how to do the work, or I was, I just really wasn't as skilled as I was letting on to be. So there is a piece of that confidence that, I can just throw it out there. Then it's learning, okay, what do I do when I'm now in a situation where I don't know what to do? And that's
so you had the opposite. You had almost the opposite problem that a lot of people have, which is, there's that whole idea of fake it till you make it, right? But you're like, you had the opposite where you're like, I'm already confident enough, but now I got to go back and
learn how to do this. I mean, well, I guess this is similar to fake it till you make it, but I mean, most people develop confidence. Well, I did
later.
Through horses. Yeah, it was early on. It was just that I learned how to take that through. And so when I talk to people and I talked about to potential clients, the confidence issue is never the issue. They're like, okay, I know you can help me. So it's like, that's not the issue. It's, it's other things, whatever is going on in their world. And it's usually around, am I really ready to take this step? Do I really want to make these changes? Do I really want to be this person? Because it's scary when we look at ourselves and go, I know I'm not this person. Am I really willing to put forth whatever I need in order to become that person? And I tell you what, I am in this ever and never ending training on learning to become a better, stronger, more amazing person. So,
and that's something I think we should all be in, right? We should, if I guess there's plenty of people who don't perhaps think of becoming a better person. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why you have a lot of sadness, a lot of lack of fulfillment. Even, you always hear about people who win the lottery or who strike it rich or do something, achieve great success. And they bottom out into these horrible depressions because I think it's precisely because they don't know that they have permission to continue to improve themselves, or maybe they choose not to improve themselves, or they make some bad choices. I'm sure that some of them just make bad choices.
I think there's a lot of fear and beliefs that come up in our lives, and it's like, if I'm this way, if I'm forceful, then people aren't going to like me. If I'm too strong, then people are going to shy away from me. If I'm too weak, people aren't going to listen to me. I mean, we have all these stories running through our head. Whatever your story is, that's your story. And now what am I going to do with that? Is it helping? Is it serving me? Or is it, sending me out the door and down the road in a direction I don't want to go?
Well, I mean, you come up at some point, you'll hit you'll hit loggerheads, right? You'll hit a point where that story you're telling isn't reflective of the reality around you, right? And, at that point, if you don't have help or a couple dozen really good books to help you figure out what the heck's going on, you could end up into serious trouble. I mean, that's, I think, where it helps to understand that you are allowed to reinvent yourself, that you can, you can just do something new. Now, I know this is an area that is of particular interest to you, reinvention and not only helping people reinvent themselves, but also you've done your fair share of reinvention yourself. It seems like, going from horses to law enforcement to
apartment management. I mean, I got into all kinds of unique fields. And just the law enforcement is probably the one that I realized that I was very good at working with people in conflict, because I would get sent out to neighborhood groups. I've never carried a weapon. So the only ammunition I had was my ability to listen and perceive what was going on and talk people out of whatever their situation was. So doing that, just all of a sudden it was like people would say, "You're really good at that." I hated my neighbor until you came over, and now I realize that I need to go over and help them. That's how things would turn out. I remember one night I had 66, I think it was, furious neighbors. They were ready to lynch the neighborhood kids. They were all in this meeting and they were angry. And I remember writing on this board behind me. I said, "So let's talk about our options." And so people were throwing out options. One was burn their house. Another one, and I let them put the options down, because we're trying to get the frustration out instead of say, "Oh no, we want to just play nice," because then people were going to leave. They were upset. And we just discussed all kinds of options. And so finally I went back to the board and I said, "Okay, first ones we have to do is cross off everything that's illegal. So burning the house has to come off the list." And so the whole room, they went from, furious and angry to, they just started laughing because they realized, well, here I am representing law enforcement. And I'm saying, "We can't do this because it's illegal. I'll have to come arrest you." So it was just getting people to look at themselves, laugh at some of the ideas that they have, and come up with some ideas that might work. And by the end of that meeting, they were at a whole new space. And they said it was just, they were ready to help their neighbors. So understanding that, okay, some of us just have ability to do those things, not all of us. And how do I do that? How do I learn it? And what do I do? And so now I've, the deep dive. How did I do that? What did I do? So honestly, I don't like conflict. I want everybody to get along. So I'm a conflict coach because I'm used to it. I live in it all the time, seems like. I get hired for it. So what am I going to do to help people get along? It's been fun.
We talk a lot about like leadership coaching and about finding the best version of yourself and self-awareness, self-discovery. We talked a little bit about EQ as well. I don't often get into the idea of conflict, actually. And talking, not in the context of my podcast. Let me back that up a little bit, because I am I'm a communicator.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a marketer and I do my best.
You're a beautiful communicator.
Thank you so much. I've been working at it for 20 some odd years, and I never really thought of myself as a communicator until the podcast. Really, I've always had been doing marketing and communications, and marketing communications and communications marketing. It's various combinations of those two words, and I often thought of myself as a marketer first, or as a digital guy, or occasionally as a writer. But to think of it full stop as a communicator is a fairly recent kind of summation, I think, because it encompasses all of those things, plus this kind of imperative, I feel, a pull, I guess, to communicate out to the world, however big or small that world is at the moment. Whether it's a couple hundred listeners, a couple thousand, however many are going to listen to this episode or any episode I do, just to share. Not my story necessarily, but the story of somebody fascinating and interesting that I come across and that I speak to. It's communicating that curiosity that I really want to do. And I love curiosity and creativity and those things. And I think we'll touch on that in a minute, but there's another C, the conflict there. So it's amazing how C ends up being such an important letter. So we talk about confidence, curiosity, creativity, conflict. Part of what I do and what I have done is crisis, is another C, crisis communications, which is all about conflict and resolving conflicts of some sort. I've been involved in some big, large deals, like money deals with previous employers, and where a lot of risk at stake. Nothing necessarily that makes it into the public, but there's a lot riding on it. Now, when you're dealing with conflict, you're dealing with interpersonal conflict for the most part,
For
right?
the most part, sometimes business to business.
And business to business as well. So when you do that, like, what are the kinds of things that you're coming across in, your day to day with your clients? Why would somebody call you to help with their conflicts? What is, and it's not about burning down the neighborhood with 66,
Yeah, that
with
was
bad
back in the
neighbors.
day.
That's a great entree to that. But like, what is it?
Yes.
How does it manifest now?
I had one of my clients. He called me one day. He says, "I'm going to fire them all. I hate them. They're just not working." And then I had another. I've had several of my clients say, "I hate my people. I'm firing them. They're done. I'm finished." So there's that conflict. There's that inner turmoil that somebody is wanting some kind of work. And often we do. When we own a business, we expect everybody to run the business the same way we would run the business. And nobody runs a business the same way you do. Nobody thinks the same way you do. They're just not. And so right away, there's this thing, you have this expectation, and somebody's not going to fulfill it quite the way you will. And if you can't articulate what you're expecting or what you'd like them to change, it's very difficult to make that happen. And then comes the either passive aggressive behavior or the anger or the snide comments, and they just escalate. It goes from this silent seething to an all-out war. And this can happen. And usually I say that everything starts with a trigger incident. Something happens somewhere. Somebody rolled their eyes, and that person that they got their eyes rolled toward decided that this person hates me. They don't like what I'm saying. I'll never believe them again, and I don't like them. And so there goes that story that we tell ourselves, the inner belief system that they're now building around a person that may or may not even have had anything to do with them. And so we've got that story going on, and then they're giving off negative vibes, so to speak. And so the other people around them are sensing it. And every time they're in the room, they're like, "What did you do to so-and-so?" They're like, "I don't know." All those things are just bringing up and starting some of the turmoil that happens on teams. So I do a lot of team work, trying to get the teams back together. Sometimes it's between owners who just are not friendly to their staff. It's like, that's not my job to be friendly to you. Your job is to work for me. I hired you, didn't I? There's those kinds of attitudes that are prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
In some workplaces, and then there's the exact opposite. But the ones that are prevalent there, those are the ones that bring me in because they're, what do I do? Their HR director, who is all friendly and warm, says, "We don't know what to do with this."
We don't want to have lawsuits on our hands. We don't
That's
want to fire
right. And
people,
we don't want to fire. We need to fire the boss. We can't fire the boss, and we can't fire the people. And really, the reasons why we would fire anybody aren't good. So what do we do?
That puts you in a bind, right? Puts you in one heck of a pickle, I'd say.
It's not my pickle.
In fact,
Yeah.
someone's pickle is your bouquet of roses, because
That's it is.
That's the time for you to come in and shine. It's interesting because, we go through that at a small level or at some level with so many interactions, throughout our life, a day-to-day basis sometimes. And it's always a challenge when you start something new, or when you have new people who are joining your, in a business's team. It's almost like you have a new person in your family. And that's a lot like what it's like. You have somebody new joining your family. Maybe you're the new person joining the family. However it goes. I think we've all been in that situation, here and there. And we all have kind of, I find anyway, that everybody has some kind of, whether it's a superpower or just some sort of good ability to shine, the way that, to relate to others. You have to find that. What is that particular superpower, and how can you use that, in a positive way to help smooth over the conflict, or help bond your relationship and build trust first before it devolves into some sort of the conflict, because the conflict ultimately is a loss of trust, right? So right? So building that trust in the first place is so critically important. So I'm getting somewhere with this. There's a
I
question.
love your whole superpower thing. I think this is great.
Well, there's
Keep
a question.
going.
There's a question that's hanging in my mind here, right? Because like I've always felt that like, one of my superpowers is to be, face to face with people or a group of people. And I'm just a good social person, and I know that get me in a bar with a half a dozen people and I'll have 6 friends, generally speaking.
That's right.
I get part of that from my dad, who was a very gregarious and social person. And my mom's fairly social too. But, I didn't have any brothers or sisters growing up. I have a half brother, half sister, but I always had to make a lot of friends. So, I'm good at that. Not always great at keeping them, which is a whole different story.
Well, that's a lot of juggling, a lot of friends.
Yeah. But still, to get in and to sort of build that trust to begin with, is something that I feel is something I can do pretty well now. And hopefully by June, everybody's going to have 1 to 2 needles jabbed in their arms, and we'll all be vaccinated and everything. And I'm proud to say that I just had my second, so I'm ready to go out into the world. But we've all been challenged over the last year to do what we need to do from home and from away. And that includes interacting with people, and sometimes interacting with people you've never met. So if your superpower is, this building social capital, building trust in this kind of face-to-face situation, now we're remote, and Zoom and WebEx and these things only go so far. How can you still build the trust and avoid the conflict is one thing. Like that's first part of the question. So how can you build trust in this environment? And secondly, when there is a conflict, how much more difficult is it to solve these days?
Excellent.
Yeah.
I like it.
See, I went
the
somewhere.
game is afoot.
It is.
Well, my number one thinking is, and correct me if this sounds different to you, is just being aware of how you're showing up. Because the good news about Zoom is you get to see what you look like when you talk to them. So if I am rolling my eyes, I get to see it. If I'm seeing it, I get to see exactly what it is I'm doing and how I'm giving off whatever it is that impression is on that other person. So to me, that is a bonus, a benefit of having the video. And even if you minimize your screen and you maximize someone else's, because I do that just so that I can pay attention to that person. But sometimes if it's a sensitive conversation, I have both screens going because I want to see how I'm coming off. I want to make sure that I am on full-blown awareness of how I'm showing up and being present. Nobody can see this because we're on audio, but if I were to pick up my phone or if I were to look down at my laptop all of a sudden, or my keyboard, or go into the other room and I'm still on the headphone, people notice and they feel like you don't care. You're not paying attention anymore. And those little cues are huge because I think that they get blown up.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think they're exacerbated now with this situation?
But boy, wouldn't we, when we meet each other and, the whole complaint that people have had with this whole smartphone generation is that everybody's looking at their phone instead of each other. They're even sitting at the table texting each other. So Zoom is requiring that we do eye contact again. I think it's bringing us back in many ways.
I mean, I think it absolutely kept us from falling into some sort of crazy, solitary confinement hell during this last year. I think, thank God for broadband and for webcams and just the idea that we're all on TV now, basically, essentially.
Yeah.
So initially, I think it definitely is a saving grace. At the same time, everybody copes with it differently. You got to get used to this whole thing of, it's kind of eye contact, but it's kind of not, because I know that, like, as I look at my camera, I can't see you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you now it looks like
Exactly.
I'm giving you eye contact. And by the way, for my listeners, I'm looking straight at my camera so that Pamela can see my eyes. But if I want to look at Pamela, I have to look. Now I look kind of off kilter, and in a face-to-face situation, that's like, oh, you look shifty.
Right. It's pretty clear. I totally agree.
But it's these things you get used to, right? And
yes. And we tell each other. I'll tell my clients, I'm like, okay, so the reason why it looks like I'm looking up and down is because I'm typing notes around what we're talking about, or I'm looking this up right now because you just mentioned it. So I am communicating all the way. So they feel like they know exactly what I'm doing and why I may not be connected.
Yeah, I'm holding up my pad and pen just to show Pamela that I have not been looking at my phone.
She has been taking notes. I watched you taking notes. I knew you were taking notes.
I'll tell you, there's got to be somebody compiling a list of the terrible things that podcasters do or people on podcast interviews do. Like how could you invite a guest and then like check your phone? That to me would be like egregiously wrong. I understand if somebody forgets to turn their phone off, or that's a common, like that's an occupational hazard these days, and it's been happening for however many months we've been doing this. But anyway, like the whole idea though is that it's, is it harder to build trust now?
I think so, and I was going to the second one, but I just wanted to know if you thought awareness and being aware, because that to me is really important. I'm aware of what I'm doing, how I'm showing up, how you're showing up. So the second one is calling out the elephant in the room. I mean, it's like, hey, is something going on? Oh yeah, my kids texted me, like 16 times in a row, and I just need to check and see if this is an emergency.
Fair enough.
And, something like that, so that it's like if we really do ask what's going on and we're curious and we're present instead of making assumptions, then we're going to be in a better space. Now, if we're talking to somebody and every time you talk to them, their head's down and you hear the keyboard clicking and you have to keep bringing them back to the conversation, then that tells me they're not paying attention. They're doing something else. And so if we can call out the elephant, that is going to, that person is actually going to go, well, yeah, okay. They're going to start paying attention because you caught them. And it's like, okay, maybe they can do that with somebody else, but they can't do it with you anymore.
How embarrassing.
And so now you've made them honest. I know it is. It's terrible. And my kids are great at doing that stuff. It's like, Mom, what are you doing?
They catch you.
But it's great because it forces me to make sure that I am more present with anybody else, because you think you can get away with stuff and you can't. We actually read it pretty darn well.
Yeah, so. And I would hope that people have the skill or the I don't know, is Zoom a skill now? I don't know, but at least the wherewithal to say, you know what, now is a time for me to turn off the camera and the sound, but tell people I'm going to step away for a moment because I have to take care of something urgent. If you're you have to treat it almost like you're in a regular meeting with other people, where if you were in a meeting in person, before the age of cell phones, this would never happen. But since the age of phones, or since the age of
somebody knocks on your door.
There's nothing wrong with excusing yourself from the room. Like, there's almost never anything wrong with that. Pardon me, I will be right back. I do apologize.
Exactly.
You have to treat your Zoom the same way, I suppose. But it goes,
yes.
I just think it takes a long time to get to that trust point. Maybe it's two things. Like, you're willing to give people the benefit of the doubt a little bit more than we did before, I think. So you meet new people and you give them a lot more leeway than you would have before, because we've all been through this craziness. And you're in your home or wherever you're at, it's in an office by yourself, in your car, wherever you may be. You got stuff going on, and yet you're giving me some attention right now, and I appreciate that. So, benefit of the doubt, it's there, right? Kind of wears off after a while, though, right? Because after a while, that novelty kind of fades, and you get to know the person, but you don't get to know the person as well as you might have had you been able to go for a dinner, sit down in the office and,
That's true.
bitch about
Absolutely.
something, whatever it is that you need to do. I mean, you can still do those bitch and moan sessions through Zoom. Don't get me wrong. It happens, but I'm finding it, it's a very challenging thing. And certainly, for leaders out there who are in conflict or who are team building or who are, tasked with hiring someone, some of these kind of things that require what normally would have required reading body language, like hearing voice the way it's meant to be heard through your natural ears, watching people's eyes. We're animals fundamentally. We have to look at the cues and the tells. Without that available, it makes things a lot harder. Not impossible, but really hard.
Right. I just think that we're shifting our tells, if we start out with Neanderthal, their tells were supposedly grunts and, motions. And, we just, as we've evolved, we've learned, even if we were back in the 1400s, it was the written word. I mean, that was how you had to put your sincerity out there. Especially if you're communicating with somebody that's clear across the oceans or even a town. So yes, we really value that person to person, because that's where family happens. It's very difficult to have a family when you're long distance. It's just very difficult. You need to be hugged. You need to be held. We're people. So I'm not trying to say that to lessen that. I'm just saying that we're getting better at these tells, because we're surviving through this. We are finding a way to get through it. And I think that's powerful. That is the amazement of our humanity and our creativity and our ability to find a way to make this work. And trust is a choice, right?
And I'm very curious to see how the communication skills or the communication kind of modes of people have changed or will change in the long run as a result of this, this crazy year.
Absolutely.
I think you're onto something there where, we've changed our tells. We've shifted our tells. I wonder what happens when we go in person. Like mask wearing is going to be a thing, right? It's going to always be a thing.
People are going to have to wear this, they're going to not be talking in their pajamas as much. Actually, every time you go in, when I hit Walmart, half the people are in their pajamas still.
Wasn't it always thus? Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. I don't think this really going to change,
But imagine like one thing, when we're on Zoom or when we're on video, I can see somebody smile. When we get in person, there's still going to be a fair number of people who are not going to be comfortable without a mask for a while, right? Now,
exactly.
Then that kind of raises the question. Wait a second. So if you're with people who are uncomfortable without a mask, does that mean I should also wear a mask to make them comfortable, even though I am immune or been vaccinated or whatever, and the risks are zero? Well, like so this whole cycle of thinking, it's so many layers that you have to go through, and it can drive you nuts.
They are. You're right.
Stressful, but
what if you just keep calling the elephant out? So, for instance, I'm walking down, I'm walking in the park, and I'm not wearing a mask because I'm in the park. Exactly. But as soon as I walk up to people, they move away from me. Like we need a 12 to 50 foot distance between me and her, because I don't know why. And I have a choice right then to think, you're full of fear, and how dare you do this to me? Or you think I'm going to get you. Should I breathe on you? All these things that run through our minds naturally. Or, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry I offended you. I didn't mean to offend you. The gamut runs through our minds, and we have to make a choice. And so my choice is to step aside, to smile, and to accept them for who they are. This is a journey, Dan. It's continual, and you're right. We're gonna, as soon as we've got one thing down, the next one's gonna come.
People are gonna choose to do things differently. I think we're gonna get really good at reading crow's feet. So I mean, like on the corners of your eyes. Right?
You're right. Yeah, I hear you. At first,
because like you can wear a mask and you could you could make all kinds of faces under your mask. Nobody would know. But if you're smiling and there's crow's feet, people know. Like people can see. In fact, I learned recently from another guest of mine, Elaine Jacques. She said she studies body language and things like that, and she said that a smile. People say a smile is, of course, contagious, right? And people respond to smiles. But if you smile without crow's feet, it's freaky, right? It can freak someone out.
Okay, now I have to try it.
It's an odd. It's a very impossible. It comes across as ingenuine, of course, because it doesn't. The body will not be recognized as a real smile. It'll be recognized as something different because a smile is a whole face maneuver. And, that's why like people who get plastic surgery or something get the Botox, when they smile and they look, it's very off-putting to a lot of people because it's just odd. They don't have the crow's feet going on. But once we have the masks on, are we going to be looking at, your crow's feeding at me, or is there, I wonder.
So let's just talk about energy. Because we give off energy, we give off a frequency. So if I'm walking around you and I really care, I think you're going to feel it. And if I don't care, I think you're going to feel that. And if I'm attitudinal, you're going to see it in my body language, maybe. Or you may not be able to read my crow's feet because, I've got glasses on and it's really hard to see or whatever. At the same time, they're going to feel it. Because we give off, we literally, I think it's like 300, I don't know. I don't know the numbers. I just know that there is a real distance out there that we give out energy and people pick it up within so many feet. And it's beyond the 6 feet that we're giving ourselves. So if you walk by somebody like you're in a store and they're angry, it's like you naturally just move away from them. You can feel it. You don't want this guy throwing, cans at your feet. You just don't want that. And when you see people who are happy and laughing, it's like people are literally drawn. They want to get closer and find out what they're doing. So that I think that we give off something that never changes. You don't know I don't know how we can hide energy.
I don't think you can. And the only time that's the danger, I think, of continued two-dimensional video conversations. To some degree, I think you can hide your energy, or you can be deceptively energetic for 15, 20, 30 minutes at a time, with the benefit of the screen and technology in front of you. And a microphone can make you sound better than you really are, or can make you sound more energetic than you really are. And a good camera can do wonders for you, but in person, it's going to be really hard to hide that energy. But ultimately, I think you'll get called out with. It's hard you can't do that consistently. And I'm sure some people can. Some psychopaths out there might be able to.
Probably. And I don't pretend to be, a psychologist. I just really like to help people figure out how to live the life they want to live. So, and that's more conflict free.
I like that. I like that as a way to sort of, kind of wrap this up too, because we experience conflict all the time in small doses and in large doses, and we don't often know how to turn. We don't know where to turn to. But it's people like you, Pamela, who can help people through that kind of conflict at work, for sure, and conflict in their professional lives. And it's a valuable thing. We talk about, being curious, being creative. We talk about finding your best self. We talk about awareness, but people don't often talk about, dealing straight with the elephant in the room and with conflict. And it's refreshing to hear about them.
Well, those are the answers, though. Those are the answers. All the things you said, creativity, curiosity. Those are the answers. That is what we do, how we get over it.
This whole year or more is, I think, teaching people to be way more creative than they ever were before, even if they don't realize it. And by creative, I mean coming up with novel ways to approach, conventional problems. I mean, fundamentally, at its basest point, I always say creativity is just making something where there wasn't something before, right? It's a creation. I don't want to use creation to define creativity. So, but I think that's got to happen on a almost atomic level now, as we start to shift back into, some of us start to shift back into, actually associating with people again. Wow. The shock, or the culture shock, I think, that's going to hit on a larger level. I don't think everybody's aware of this yet, and it's gonna.
No, because I don't think we know how to treat each other anymore, because it can never be the same.
I think it helps, though, to be genuinely curious about people, to really care and be concerned about their experiences, then come up with,
I think
thank
you're
you,
absolutely
come up with
right.
some creative conclusions.
I love that. Just because that is the piece, Dan, that I think has been missing before, and is a big piece of some of the problems our country is going through right now, is because people have just sort of stuck in their own lane, and now we're having to broaden that and say, who are you? And I'd like to know you more. I'd like to get to know you, and I'm genuinely curious and interested, and we'll find a commonality. Just like you said, when you come to that area of conflict earlier, you mentioned, and I forgot to capitalize on it, is that you had mentioned that, we find those areas of commonality with people, and that's where we can, that's the road that we get through. That, it may be just literally a needle, threading a needle, but that's the needle hole that we go through to get to people and find out how to build that trust.
And the only way to do it is by genuinely asking questions and wanting to hear the answers,
Which is what
that's why I do this. That's exactly why I do this show. Curiosity. I started off by thinking it's a creative adventure, but it's not. It's a curious adventure. I love being on this kind of, curious adventure. And that's what I think is the only thing that matters to me, it's not the only thing that matters, but it's one of the main things, one of the main motivators for me and a day-to-day going to work every day or thinking about what I'm going to do every day, because I'm really curious about what's going to happen and about what something means. And as long as I maintain that curiosity, that desire to learn and to understand people more, you can never get bored.
You probably stay out of a lot of conflict.
Oh yeah. Too. I'm good at conflict avoidance, and that's not always a good thing. That's another podcast, Pamela. Yeah.
Booked.
Thanks. Pam, so look, I suggest to our listeners, check out Pamela on LinkedIn. Pamela Cournoyer, her name will be spelled properly in the episode title. So check her out on LinkedIn. Pamela, where else can people find you?
My website is powerfulandtrue.com.
Powerfulandtrue.com.
Yes.
Are you on the Twitters and on the and any place else?
No.
Okay, you don't need to be there. Trust me, it's a horrible place.
Mostly on LinkedIn. Yeah. I finally decided to just kind of hang in one place, and I work with professionals. So LinkedIn is the place to be. I am. And then my website.
So LinkedIn or powerfulandtrue.com. Pamela Cournoyer, it has been an incredible pleasure to see you and to hang out with you and to spend some time with you. And I hope we do it again.
For me as well, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.